All right. Real happy to be joined by my next guest on the Sports Card Shop guest line. It's his first time on the show. I got to hang out with him a little bit, a couple years in Cooperstown, but there's a lot of people that we were kind of in a group, but very man that wears many hats, very talented as well, and glad to finally have him on the show, Mr. Jason Schwartz. Welcome.
John, thank you, man. Your intro music kind of got me pumped up. It was like a walk-up song or something.
Yes,
It's like now I've got to really deliver.
It's like from my football coaching days. It gets everyone going, and then we run out through the doors, and away we go, and here we are. Like I said, you do a lot of different things. But I know you're passionate about the hobby, and you do a lot of good stuff. We're gonna get to that, but you're also involved with Saber SABR.
Yep.
I know I have a lot of friends that are involved in it, so I'm familiar with it. Do I know everything? No, but I probably know more than the average person. I think people who are baseball fans, Jason, kind of think they know what it is, or have a perception of what it is and what it does and what it entails, and probably in some of those cases not accurate. So to for those that know about it or are interested in it, in your words, kind of explain what it is and what it entails.
Yeah, right on, John. So I've been a member since 2019. I'll start by saying that before I joined, I didn't actually have a good idea what it was. I was under the impression, because of the word sabermetrics and maybe some of the earlier history, Bill James and his books, I was under the impression that it was literally 100% devoted to statistics, formulas, analytics, which it's not that I dislike that stuff, but those aren't really the things that connect me to the sport. And so it was only when I started reading the Saber Baseball Cards blog and I was like, oh, this is cool. Saber actually has sort of a sub community of people that care about baseball cards and write about baseball cards. And then I got invited to join and write for the blog. And so initially my end was the baseball cards, but then what I found was that there were just all these different committees and communities. There's like Negro leagues, there's women in baseball, ballparks, landmarks, history, baseball, and the arts, right? So it's like just about any way that you're a fan of the game. Saber's got a community of people that enjoy it in the same way, that it's cool to get to know. Some of them might be people you've heard of, whether they're authors or media personalities. And then others are, just kind of more like me, just some random person, But I've made a lot of friends and a lot of connections. And, really the unifying feature of Saber is we all love baseball, right? Now, I'll put a little twist on that, right? You probably got some of us that loved baseball in the 1970s and 80s, and now we're kind of annoyed and we wish it was like it was when we were kids or something. But I mean, the point is we all love baseball. From what era? Well, who knows, right? Maybe the 1800s.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's an organization where you join. It's $65 a year, which is a bargain because you get all kinds of freebies out of it, newspapers.com, all kinds of digital publications. There's all kinds of Zooms, there's in-person meetings, lunches, whatever. I mean, to me, it's the biggest bargain there is in the baseball world. And, and it's just really for anybody who's passionate about baseball, there's a spot for you in Saber. I can say that. I'm not a formulas guy and I feel right at home.
Yeah, and no doubt, and the people that I know that are in it are like you said, they love the sport, they're passionate. They may not be analytics people. And like you said, there's many different wings. It's almost I hate to use this comparison, Jason. It's almost like sort of like government, but like you got the agriculture department, you got your defense department. It's sort of like the baseball version of that. So whatever you like, or kind of whatever lane or alley you want to go into, all those bases are covered. Pun unintended there. But so whatever whatever, and if you are an analytics guy, maybe
Hmm.
or girl, it's there for you. So there's whatever hat you wear, whatever you like. There's something for you. You mentioned $65 a year. That's when you think about what certain other things cost. That's a minimal price to pay, and you get a lot of bang for your buck, as you pointed out. So, it's and again, like you said, even yourself, you said I didn't really know what it was until kind of I looked more into it. That's kind of why I wanted you to, being on the show, kind of to because I think there are people that probably thought like I used to think, or like you did before you joined, and maybe that'll open an avenue up for someone that's on the fence or think it's one thing and it's actually the way you describe it might it might expand, and there's chapters all over the country. I'm right near. I'm an hour from Cooperstown. We have a chapter here, and no matter where you live, almost there you'll be local in some respect to a chapter, and I think that's just a testament to the game of baseball, and it's obviously wide reach. So
Yeah.
I know you're originally from California, and you're a Dodgers guy. Kind of talk about card wise, who you love, who do you collect, what you're where you kind of where your passion lies within the hobby.
Well, how long do we have? Uh, yeah, well, I'll take it back to the beginning. You mentioned I'm from California. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm in the Chicago area now. I've been here
Yeah,
since 2010, but grew up in Los Angeles. And when I found myself in a new school in, I think it would have been the second grade, something like that, right? I wasn't great at making friends or whatever, but I noticed at least a lot of boys in the class, at all the breaks, lunchtime, whatever, they'd break out baseball cards and start trading. And I saw that as kind of my avenue in. I didn't have any baseball cards. I'd collected stamps, I'd collected coins, right? But that got me to the 7-Eleven, bought some packs, got some 1978 tops, and all of a sudden it was like instant friendships. And some of these guys I'm still in touch with today, which is the crazy thing because it's been 45 years. At that time, the absolute solid gold, right? Growing up in LA, 1970s with Steve Garvey, right? And so it was kind of like I had made it when I pulled my 1978 top Steve Garvey, right? Then it was sort of like, I mean, this was the currency of cool, having the Garvey card. And, it just created some friendships for me. And, in some cases, the hobby outlasted the friendships. In some cases, the friendships are still there. But, that's really where I got my start. I mean, today I'm still a Dodger collector. I kind of pick and choose. Most of my collection is vintage, and it's funny. I'm old enough that the cards I was opening as a kid are now called vintage, which is like I'm not cool with that, but I guess I accept it. Uh, so things like right now I'm working on the 1939 and 1940 play ball Dodger team sets, right? Not a lot of star power, but fun to collect. I'm into the older sets. I've completed the 33 Gaudy Dodgers, 34 Gaudy Dodgers. I'm a card shy of the T206 Dodgers, although I should call them Superbas, right? So my fellow Sabre members don't get on me. But so I got a lot of things like that are Dodger team sets. Those collections are all pretty active because there's so many that there's always somebody you need some year. In terms of players, my biggest collection is actually not a Dodger. It's by number of
yeah,
cards, it's Rick Gooden. And by what I'll just call coolness of the collection, it's Henry Aaron. Those are probably my two main player collections, but I've got Kershaw. Of course, I still got Garvey, Roy
yeah.
Campanella. I'm a guy that every now and then I say to myself, I think I need to focus a little. I'm getting a little crazy. Not that long ago, and this is like heresy for a Dodger fan. I got into King Carl, right? Carl
Yeah.
Hubble, New York Giants legend. So, I'm a little bit all over the map, but at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of it comes back to the Dodgers, and a lot of it comes back to just my earliest days collecting cards, making friends, and still trying to do the same.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? And I'm a Mets guy, but like I collect stuff other than Mets. And one of my, I get asked, what do you PC, John? And I still do shows as a dealer. I did my first show at 15, Jason. But my PC is Hall of Fame graded rookies. And it's funny you
Yeah.
mentioned Hank Aaron. That was my latest addition was an Aaron this. Sunday night. I put one bid on this card. It's a PSA 3.5. I figured someone was going to come over the top and outbid me, and if they had done that, I'll say this now, I would have been out,
Yeah.
and the clock just ticked down, and somehow, some way, I don't know. I think everyone's saving their money for the national, which is what I typically do 90 days in. So I kind of broke the rule with this purchase, Jason, and no one came over the top, and so I'm happy to say a card I wasn't ever sure. It was always on my list. And the Jackie 48 Leaf, which I got last year, uh, it was my Grail card, but this was right there. And I had a couple great shows that I did, and so I had some money put aside, and I'm like, this is the next card I want to try to sort of get. I was kind of thinking I would get it at the national, but it worked. It worked out this way. But and I knew you were a big Aaron guy, and you can't go wrong. He's obviously in my heart. He's still the home run champ. It's. I know it's up for debate to some, but to me, that's where my heart lies. And he's just was a great player of the game, quiet guy, just went about his business, not a big trash talker or look at me type guy, and just all the numbers are there to speak for his play. It's funny hearing you mention Steve Garvey. So my dad grew up in Ebbets Field and fan of all those early Dodgers, including Jackie, Duke, Campy. The list is endless.
It is.
He didn't follow. He didn't follow the LA Dodgers as much when they moved. His heart kind of got broken. But
Yep.
the one guy that even my dad's still alive. He's 84. But the one guy the one LA Dodger that my dad would still talk about, even though obviously he didn't, start his career in Brooklyn, was Steve Garvey. And he's a guy that is really on that sort of fence, like him and Don Manley of are they Hall of Famers?
Sure.
And so I'll ask you. I know, like you mentioned, kind of your affinity, and he was like the guy that when you first started collecting. I'll put you on, a semi hot seat. Like, is in your heart is Steve Garvey a Hall of Famer?
Well, that's not the hot seat at all. In my heart, of course, he's a Hall of Famer, 100%. Now, in my head, is he a Hall of Famer? I'm going to say yes to that as well. I'll give a couple reasons, but first, I got to say this for your dad. If he hasn't yet seen the photo of Steve Garvey as like I guess a 10-year-old kid bat boying for the Dodgers, posing with Gil Hodges, he should check that out because that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've seen that, and I don't think he has seen it. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
on my
yeah. Show
next
that to
time.
him.
Next time we're together, I'll pull it up and what I'll do is I'll just ask him, "Hey, you recognize the Bat Boy?"
Right.
And see
Yeah.
see what he says.
Yeah, oh,
But
it's one of my favorite pictures. So I'll tell you where I go with Steve Garvey because I will say, a lot of the more modern ways of looking at players with the analytics and whatever have definitely dampened his case. And then, I think his case was also dampened a little by some, personal issues and things like that, at the time I think we viewed as more scandalous than maybe we would today. But uh he was a 10-time All-Star, right? There's almost nobody outside the Hall of Fame, apart from PEDs and other things, uh, that's been a 10-time All-Star, not in the Hall, right? So the point is, it's elite, right? You're elite if you're a 10-time All-Star. And I'll add for the card collectors, he was a 7 consecutive time Topps All-Star first baseman. That's even more important. But the other thing too is if you look at his stat line, right? He was a guy that was good year in and year out for 162 games, 200 hits, 100 RBIs, and a 300 average. And if back then in the mid 70s, late 70s, you said, what is the gold standard? What's the standard of excellence for your first baseman? Literally, you would name exactly those things. And he did every single one year after year. He led his teams to 5 World Series in 11 seasons, right? They didn't win many, right? They only won one, as it turns out, but 5 pennants in 11 years, with him kind of being the biggest name player on the team. And my belief about him, and I feel the same way about Dave Parker, Dale Murphy, a lot of other guys that are on the fence, maybe even Don Mattingly, is when we're talking about Steve Garvey in his day, right? People weren't saying, "Hey, let's try to get on base via the walk," right? I mean, it was the opposite. If you had a guy on second and Steve Garvey up, Alston, Lasorda, they want him to swing and bring the run in. They didn't want Garvey to walk and the guy's still standing on second, right? So I think today through the analytics, we look and we're like, oh, he hardly ever walked. His on base percentage was low, even though he batted 300. He was worse than guys who batted 240 and drew walks, whatever. Okay, great. But there's almost like this assumption there that Steve Garvey wouldn't have been capable, right? I mean, honestly, these guys that were banging out 200 hits, knocking in runs, doing all this stuff, if somebody had said to them, "Hey, man, I want you to walk 100 times this year instead of getting 100 RBIs," I think they could have done it. I mean, Garvey, he came out of football, Cobra, same thing. These guys were phenomenal athletes. He obviously had great hand-eye, right? He could see the strike zone as well as anybody. He was living up to the standards of the time, what his managers and coaches wanted him to do, right? And so it's kind of funny because if you look at it, Alston, Lasorda, right? The guys running the show are in the hall, right? And all he was doing was exactly what they wanted him to do. And he was the best at it. He was consistent at it. He's still the NL Ironman. So, to me, I don't think it's right to sort of recalculate his greatness based on things we know today that he didn't know and his coaches didn't know, right? I mean, the way we evaluated greatness back then, I believe, at least most mainstream fans, was wow, 300 average, 200 hits, 100 RBIs, all-star, and it just felt like him every year. So I'd put him in without a doubt.
Yeah, I concur. And as a younger man or younger kid, even when he played, like you said, he was just consistent year in year out, from not missing games to being clutch. Like you said, 5 pennants in 11 years. That doesn't happen. It didn't happen much then. It doesn't happen much now. I know, like you said, they only one ring, but that's still to get to five, almost every other year to be in the World Series is saying something. He was really sort of at that time uh, the face of the franchise. 10 All Stars. That's just like and it's great you let off with that stat because I think that one really hits home right off the bat the most. Like uh, to be double digit All Star, not be in the Hall of Fame, and he was what first basemen were striving to be. He was a great defensive player too. We talk about his hitting. How much of that off the field stuff? Do you think that's why he's still not in, Jason? I hate when we compare players from different eras to today because it's not fair to either group. Truth be told, but so you think it's the off the field stuff, and second part to that question, you think there's a chance with a veterans committee that someday, like Gil Hodges, who got in way much too late, but he got in. You think we see that potentially for Garvey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say yes to everything. So I think the off the field stuff hurt him when he was on the writer's ballot, right? Because I think the analytics hadn't kicked in quite as much. I think he was still looked at as a guy that had a hell of a career. But I think the off the field maybe dissuaded some writers, et cetera, right? I think nowadays the special committee voters probably don't care about that as much, but I do think they're highly influenced by the analytics, right? For instance, recently, the year Ted Simmons got in, Garvey was on the ballot, right? Now, when both those guys were playing, I don't think you could find anyone, not even Ted Simmons's mom, who would have told you, I think Ted's better than Steve. I don't think there was a soul on the planet who thought that while they were playing, right? But the fact that Simmons got in and Garvey got hardly any votes, right, tells you that these special committees, I think, are looking a lot at the analytics. So I think with Garvey, there's sort of two ways right? That a guy who in his time did a lot on the field can miss out. One of them is off the field activities, and then the other is, through the lens of modern analytics. And I think Garvey, when he was on the writer's ballot, checked off that first box, unfortunately. And now on the special ballots, checks off the second box. Now, is there hope? I think there is hope, but I will say that year that Simmons and Miller got in, Garvey, Cobra, Murphy all missed out was a heartbreaker to me because I really thought that that was the year that it might happen. And I don't recall the exact totals, but I don't believe that he was close, right? I mean, we saw recently Dick Allen missed by one vote, right? I think with Garvey, he might have missed by something like 4 or 5, which out of 16 or whatever it was is kind of a lot to miss by. Um, so I'd like to think yes. And then one of the things, and this isn't a feature of the system, I'd say it's a bug, but it may come down to the composition of the next committee, right? So, as we look at Harold Baines getting in, and I know for some people, they wish he didn't. I'm glad he did. But the point is, you look at the committee and it was very favorable to him, right? You look at Cott and Oliva, who recently got in, and I think that committee was almost cherry picked. It wasn't, but I mean, it was just one that had a lot of connections to those guys. And so in the same way, I mean, maybe if there's some committee and it just happens to have guys that played with Garvey, let's say Reggie. I think Reggie has a sky high opinion of Garvey, right? I mean, if it's like Reggie and some other guys that were contemporaries and had a lot of respect for him, maybe that's what it is. I mean, it shouldn't come down to who but I think with the special committees, that does matter. And I think it's not just looking at them individually, but I think they kind of caucus and twist each other's arms and kind of do some horse trading. And so if he's got one or two strong advocates on the next special committee, maybe those guys will twist some arms. I don't know. I'd sure love to see him get in my lifetime, but more importantly in his. I mean, he takes great care of himself, so I think he's going to be around a while. But he's not a super young guy, right? And I'm a believer that if you're going to put a guy in, let him enjoy the honor. I mean, it's been a shame recently. All these guys who finally got in, Buck O'Neill, Minnie Minoso, but they're gone.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a great point. You want them to kind of, enjoy an honor that's finally bestowed. I think he's a Hall of Famer, and I don't
I
mean
appreciate it.
any slight. I don't mean any slight to Ted Simmons, who was a great, a very good catcher. I don't even want to use the word great. Sometimes we throw that around.
Yeah,
But like you said, you put those two guys up against each other, and it's a, and I think most people would pick Steve Garvey 10 out of 10 times, and that's not saying Ted Simmons was terrible. It's just
no, not at
that's
all.
how great Steve Garvey was. I think that's the other thing too. When we get into certain positions, you see guys get in with lesser stats. Catcher,
Oh,
obviously
for sure, for
at the
sure.
top of the list. Probably we're going to see Joe Mauer and
Mhm.
Buster Posey eventually join that list, and not that I'm not trying to take an honor away from them, but again, I think Steve Garvey matches up very well to some of these players now getting in, yet he's not. And I haven't heard him like complain too much. I don't know. I'm not in his head. I'm sure he's disappointed, but he's being, at least from what I can tell, a good sport about it. Some others haven't been in the past, and to each their own, right? Everyone has a different personality. Like you said, I think he should be in, and you hope that day comes that he's around to get up there and make his speech and be next to his hold his plaque up and get his picture taken. I think I growing up, there wasn't really any doubt that he was a Hall of Famer, and so the fact that we're talking today, Jason, and even debating whether he should be in. I think we are both on the same side here. I think that's sort of I hate to use the word tragic, but it's sad because I think he's sort of a no brainer. When you look at the numbers, 10 All Stars. I mean, you look at some people who are in, they don't match up as well to Steve Garvey yet. He's not, and so that's my soapbox on Mr. Garvey. He should be in, and hopefully, like you said, he will be, and hopefully he gets to enjoy that moment. So I want to segue, not a great segue into from Garvey, but you do Heavy J Studios is your studio. You do some artistic stuff with cards. It's great work to begin with, but what's even better is every you do it. It's all for different charities. People benefit from the fruits of your labor. Talk about kind of how that all started and where you are today.
Yeah, beautiful. I'll give just a quick visual in case people don't know
Yep.
this stuff. So this is like a 33 Gaudy style Eric Davis on the Dodgers, and you can see the little shimmer, the glitter paper going in the background.
Yeah.
So Heavy J Studios was something that I started early in the pandemic. I think, by memory, something like May 2020, right? So pretty early, and we all had a little extra time on our hands. We didn't have our commutes anymore, and pretty much all the social calendar stuff was getting crossed out. So, there was some free time. I had kind of experimented several months earlier with cutting out a card of Cobra and putting them on some glitter paper background. And I just thought it looked cool. And so I don't know what made the idea strike me, but somewhere around May. Oh, I know what it was. I was going through a box of cards. I found an '83 Donruss Wade Boggs rookie, pretty much in a box of commons, and I was like, "What?" And then I realized that I had like a coffee or tea stain on the border of it. And I was like, oh, maybe that's what it was, because it wouldn't be worth anything like that. But then I kind of put the two together. I was like, wait a minute. I could go Heavy J Studios on this. I could cut out the border, cut out Wade, put them on glitter, do all this stuff. And so I put it on Twitter, right? This kind of shimmery, goofy looking Wade Boggs. And at the time, I just said, hey, let's auction it off by the end of the night. All money goes to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And it ended up going for like $40, which was super cool to me because like I didn't know if anybody would want it or if it would go for like $1. But I ended up going for like $40. And then I had kind of this premonition that most normal people would have said was totally delusional on the basis of that one card. But literally, and I told my wife this, right? That card went for 40. I was so pumped. And I told my wife at the end of the night, I said, I think I'm going to try to raise $25,000 during the pandemic making these cards. And I'll tell you, I had some issues. I had some serious issues with my eyesight to where I had to slow down pretty big time. But literally, I've raised $22,000 with these glitter cards, right? And
God bless you.
some of them are so dope. I got to keep them for my personal collection. But I've made about 800 of these. I'm sort of the Bernie Sanders of the card art movement because my typical donation is about $27, right? I see some of my buddies are selling their stuff for like $300. Well, I'm kind of in the $30-ish range, 35,
Well,
whatever.
listen, 22. Listen, your $22,000 is $22,000, right? And it
It's
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the road you take to get there. The fact is, you're there, and good on you, man. Kudos to you to do that, and then to be generous on top of that, right? Listen, there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with it. I'm not critiquing anyone, right? But there's card artists that sell their card art, and no one benefits except for them, and there's not wrong with that. Like I said, and here you are sort of paying it forward to different things that are near and dear to you, and it's just very cool. And your passion, I've seen some of the stuff you've done. Your passion is in those cards. You know what I mean? The
yes,
player selection and how you do them. It's not just you spin a wheel and this is who I'm doing. Like there's a thought process to now. Has this been, I know you said you started, was this something you ever did like before? Did you have like, do you have like an artistic background, or this just all was, you know, thank the pandemic, at least for this.
I have probably the thinnest artistic resume of anybody doing stuff like this, I'd have to imagine. So when I was in high school, I did teach ceramics to 5-year-olds, but rolling clay into a ball, that was about as good as I had to be. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if we want to count that. I had a lot of the card artists, for a while, I think, maybe trying to show their, who's the OG in the card art. Well, actually, it's none of us. It's dudes that were like, working on cards in the 1880s. But at any rate, guys were like digging up, hey, here's the card I made in 1997, right? So I did find one I made in the mid 90s. It wasn't glitter, it wasn't the Heavy J Studio style, but I actually had this is embarrassing, but I had a Dream Team uniform, Magic Johnson, 1992 Olympics. And I would wear it out in public, not even just on the basketball court, but I loved it so much that, like, if I was just going to the store, I'd wear my Dream Team uni, the shorts and the tank. And I didn't exactly have the NBA body, let's say. So, anyways,
Well, listen, Kurt, not to cut you off, Kurt Rambis was a pretty good ball player. You should like be like he could play. So like
yeah, that's true. Yeah, physique isn't all it's But at any rate, a buddy of mine took a picture of me in full uniform, and I cut it out and glued it on top of like an actual Upper Deck basketball card sometime in the '90s. And so I guess I could say that was my first, kind of collage
that's the
art.
Jason Schwartz rookies. What you're
That
saying?
yeah, that's the sort of the pre Heavy J Studios.
And
Um,
super short print SSP.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, 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 yeah. So, but other than that, no. But I want to say something, and I will say, like during the pandemic, I think I was, encouraging or maybe inspired a few other folks, with similarly thin resumes like my own. Is the beauty of collage is I can be a guy that couldn't draw. If you gave me a blank piece of paper and a pen, there's like nothing I could do a good job drawing, right? If you gave me a paintbrush, I couldn't do a thing, right? But with collage, if you're willing to cut carefully and glue and you've got some fun ideas of things that would go well together, you can do it. And I used to think, well, I'm not really an artist. I just do this. But the truth is that is a way to be an artist. I've come to accept that I guess I am, right? I'm not like a, classically trained or a very versatile artist, but I've got one, kind of one thing I do. And I like what you said, because I feel like in terms of, am I the most precise cutter or the best gluer? I don't know. But I genuinely feel like I put a tremendous amount of love into every piece that I create. And, a guy one time, he ordered like 3 or 4 cards from me and uh, sent me a DM like a little bit before I was going to mail off the package. And he's like, hey, did they all turn out good? And I said to him, I said, honestly, if I didn't think one of my cards turned out good, I wouldn't send it. I'd make a new one. Like
yeah.
I stand by everything I do. I mean, I know there are people out there with more talent, but I put a tremendous amount of love. I bring a lot of knowledge of the hobby into what I make. And
Yep.
it's not for everybody. I get that, but I sure have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, listen, Jason. There's a saying. I'm not in the art world, so to speak, but my dad actually is a very good artist. And there's a saying in the art world, right? Art is from the heart, right? And that
You got
stuff
it. You got it.
is from your heart, and you better believe it's art. And while you may not be Pablo Picasso, you're an artist in your own right in what you do, and the fact that it goes towards charity and that's just even more speaks volumes about the person behind that. And so kudos to you there. Keep it up, and look forward to seeing future renditions. As that. Speaking of art, it's a good segue this time with to. I just had Dick Perez on this show a few episodes back. I first started collecting in 1979. I'm a Brooklyn kid, so Tops was in my blood, just sort of instinctively. And I remember when 81 Donruss first came out, sort of like to compete against Tops. And I don't mean any disrespect to 81 Donruss, but did not make much of an impact on my collecting habits as a 9-year old kid at the time. But it was 82 Donruss with the first rendition of Perez Steel and the Diamond Kings, and opening those packs. And even as a kid, I would at least open a few packs of everything, kind of see what's inside, what it looks like, and then, hey, where's the rest of my allowance going to really be heavily going to? And 82 Donruss, at 10 years old now, and seeing those Diamond Kings, Tops wasn't doing that. As much as I love Tops, I'm like, that sort of hit me like, hey, look at this. This is cool. This is different. I know you sort of feel the same way. If you would have told, obviously in 1982, social media didn't exist, podcasts didn't exist. But if you would have told 10-year-old me, who was actually very shy, like, hey, you're going to talk to the artist behind these cards, uh, 40 something years later, I would have thought you were nuts. And yet here we are, flashback to a couple weeks ago. And I wanted him to know, Jason, and I assumed he did, but I wanted him to know like how important his work was, and how influential it was, whether it be me being a 10-year-old kid seeing it for the first time, or people, older collectors, seeing it. And for me to say, hey, there's other, you can buy stuff other than Tops. It's okay. Companies are doing, other people in other companies are doing different things. And I was surprised when he told me, I asked him, did he know when he was in the middle of these create? Did he realize how impactful or the significance of his work? And he said, not really. He didn't, because he wasn't getting letters like, "Hey, I love you." It was after he was, when social media actually became a thing, and he said, "Hey, I got emails, or I got people messaging me." Like, hey man, Diamond Kings did it for me. That's why I collected it. It wasn't until then to that he realized, what he the impact of his work. And that just, your thoughts. I know you're a fan of his work. Just so your perspective on Diamond Kings and Dick Perez, and the movie's coming out next year, done by director Mark Evans. There's a set where you're the special set that will coincide with the release of the movie. One of us will have the serial numbered number one set. I'll give everyone a hint. The first name starts with a J. We're still we're still both in the running here. Uh, but last name starts with an S. I'm out, but you took it, you jumped on that. It's going to be a great item to your collection. But first and foremost, what Dick, the Diamond Kings, Dick Perez, back then for you.
You got it. Well, it's funny. I mean, you and I kind of started around the same, right? I mean, for me, it was
Yeah.
1978. So I had a few years under my belt before the three companies were all putting cards on shelves. For me, from the very beginning, from 1981, I was all about I'm collecting all three. I wasn't really making any tough decisions, right? I wanted them all. But like you, the Diamond Kings made an instant impact on me, right? I'll give a quick shout out, Hobby News Daily. I've got a fairly recent article up on essentially opening Donruss in 82 and my reactions at that time to Diamond King. So I got it up there. But the something that was common to all three sets in 82, and it was something that was kind of building on 81, was multiple cards of star players. And as a kid, I loved that, right? I mean, these days, maybe people make a little more of a big deal of, oh, that's not like his real card in the set. That's just his record breaker. That's not as exciting or whatever, right? But I mean, back then, like a second card of a big time player was huge, you know? I mean, it was the right formula. So, Tops 1982, they went back to kind of an older format from, the most recent time it had been 74, separate cards of all stars, right? So, although in 74 it was shared, two guys to a card. But I mean, the point is, if a guy was an all star, a Tops all star, you're going to have two cards of them. They also brought back from 10 years earlier in action, right? And so in some cases, you might get three cards of a guy. If he was a record breaker too, you might get another one. If he was, a team leader in batting average or pitching or whatever, you'd see him again. So Topps really was giving you a lot. Now with Donruss, what was cool, and I don't know that Dick Perez was doing this on purpose, and I don't know how much he was influenced by, let's say, the cards of his youth. And I'm thinking here of like 54 Topps, 55 Topps. But if you think about it, the Diamond King, right? You've got the portrait of the player, and you've got the little mini action shot. Now think about 55, 56 Topps, 54 Topps. You've got the portrait of the player with the little action shot beside him. Now, in a way, I'll take Steve Garvey as an example because he was in the original 1982 Diamond Kings, right? In a way, having an extra card called Diamond Kings, it was kind of like a Topps All-Star, right? It was an extra card that signified that this is a special elite player. But it also, I think, again, probably unintentionally, borrowed the Topps in action subset, right? Because all of a sudden you had the portrait of Steve Garvey, but you had the little tiny action shot of him too. So in a way, the Diamond Kings brought together the two innovations of the top set, the separate all-star card and the in action, but into one card. And it was just glorious artwork, right? I mean, sometimes we think the highest compliment we can give to a piece of art is, wow, I thought that was a photo, or oh my gosh, it looked like a photograph. And of course, Dick's work doesn't look at all like a photograph, right? But there's something about his work that almost brings you into the scene, right? It's not photorealistic, but it's almost like you're there. He brings these heroes to life, which is, to me, 5 steps up from bringing them to the level of photograph, right? And so his work just had an immediate impact on me. The Diamond Kings were favorites. And then the thing that was beautiful, because so often we'll see something cool in the hobby one year and then it disappears, right? Or maybe it comes back 10 years later. But Donruss had a really great run, right? For over a decade. They just did it again and again and again and again. And I know, sometimes in some of his interviews, Dick talks about, like the years he deviated, like 82 and 83 look practically identical. 84, very different. Some collectors love that. Some collectors hated it. Dick has told a lot of folks he was getting a little bored doing the same thing every year. He wanted variety. Now looking back, I think some of the non-traditional Diamond Kings of the 90s are ones collectors like the best, right? But kudos to Dick, kudos to Donruss that they had a winning formula and they just brought it back year after year after year. There's something I mentioned in my article is was it the 1982 set had an unnumbered Diamond Kings checklist, right? And of course, it had the 26 players from the 26 teams, but you flip it over and it told you that this little signature that said Perez was Dick Perez, real person. He does this. And it said, we're going to be doing this for years to come. All your favorite players will hopefully someday be Diamond Kings. And they lived up to it, right? Because it's like, okay, I got Garvey in 82. Well, who did I want in 83? I wanted Fernando. Well, that's who I got, right? Well, eventually I wanted Oral Hershiser. I wanted Kirk Gibson. I wanted Dwight Gooden, right? And it really was true. I mean, if there was a player you loved in the 80s or the 90s, really good chance they've got at least one Diamond Kings card, maybe two, right? So glorious set. But I want to, I don't want to go on too long about this, but oh my God, I love this stuff. 83, of course, we had the Diamond Kings, but also one of the most underrated sets of all time, in my opinion. Dick worked with Donruss on the Hall of Fame Heroes set. It was a very small set, like 44 players in a checklist, but you got it from packs, right? There weren't a lot of cards in a pack, but you got it from packs, right? And of course, everybody's a Hall of Famer. It was the first time ever in this country you could open a pack of baseball cards and get a Josh Gibson. It was the first time you could get a cool Papa Bell. For a lot of us, it was the first time we'd even heard of these guys, right? You could get a Satchel Paige, but of course you could in 53 and 49 and all that too. But okay. But great history on the back. I mean, this was pre-internet, so you're learning about all these great players. The artwork was beautiful. And so that 83 Hall of Fame Heroes to me is still one of my favorite sets of all time. And the funny thing is you could buy the complete set for about $6 on eBay. You know what I mean? But it is just glorious. And so I don't know if there are too many people more excited than me that Dick is working on this brand new set, that Mark is working on this movie about Dick. And so, as I got to know Mark a little bit and got excited about the movie and the Kickstarter, which is still active. And I don't know if you checked, right? This will be old by the time your audience sees it. But as of our recording, right, 30,000 was required to be raised. Yep. We're at something like 29,700, right? So in other words, this thing is going to happen. This thing is going to happen. And if Mark exceeds his goals, more gifts are going to rain down, right, from the heavens. But point is, when I saw that Dick was putting together an all new set, and there was this idea that one collector would get the 1 out of 499 across his entire set. I thought, gosh, I mean, I have to get a set, but I think I'm going to do this because I want to not just support the film, but support the film in a big way, right? So, the price tag was a little bit heftier, but I wanted to support it at that level. And then this could be a little bit of, I'll call it a mitzvah for the hobby, potentially. I haven't made up my mind just yet, right? But I know there'd be a lot of collectors who got set 1 out of 499 and they just, they'd never take it out of the box and whatnot. I'm considering, right? I mean, for me, Josh Gibson, 1 out of 499, that's in my forever collection, right? But, maybe there's an Otani collector that really wants 1 out of 499 Otani, right? Satchel Paige, 1 out of 499. I'm considering breaking it up so that folks that collect these particular players each end up with the 1 out of 499. I haven't made up my mind for sure, but I'm thinking about doing that, keeping the 3 or 4 players most special to me and then letting those other guys go out across the hobby. You and I talked about before the idea that, all of us in the hobby try to take care of each other. And I see that as something that I might do with that. So I realize I am the one that got that special set. And there's a part of me that maybe wants to hang on to it intact. And there's a part of me that wants to kind of share it across the hobby.
Well, you got a little time to decide what you
Yeah,
ultimately
true enough.
want to do, but yeah, it's great, and whatever you decide to do, right? You like you
Yeah.
said, you wanted to support the film. I want to give you a shout out on the air here too, Jason. That interview with both of that gentleman probably doesn't happen without your heads up and assistance. So I want to make that like public knowledge. I'm a give credit where credit's due guy. So there you go. I appreciate that. But
Well, I'm gonna flip it back onto you because Mark said, what are like the top podcasts in the hobby or live streams, right? And you've been doing this for over 200 episodes, right? I think there was a recent hobby mentions, right, talking about content creators, right? Is that going to thin out at some point? Because for the number of people who start a live stream or start a podcast and they're still doing it 6 months later and can boast 20 plus episodes, that is not a high win rate. You know what I mean? There is very high attrition, and the number of people that are putting out quality content, tremendous guests, except for this week, but top-notch content, right? Thoughtful interviews. It was an easy one when Mark was like, what are the live streams or podcasts that would be worthy, of Dick's time, right? I mean, to get Dick Perez, he's 82 years old, but to do these things, yours was a no-brainer, right? So I just pointed the way, but it was what you
well,
built, it's what you built.
that hits me in the feels. I appreciate that, Jason, and I know you kind of self depreciate about you being the guest this week. You have every right. We're talking about Garvey deserving to get in. You're just as great as any guest I've had. So
Too
you're
kind.
Hall of Fame guest worthy in my book, or I wouldn't have asked you to come on. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying that. And 5 years. Sometimes when I think about that, like hearing you talk about it, and then it really hits home that I've done it that long, and it doesn't really feel that long, which I think is good because I think it means I'm still passionate about it, enjoy doing it. I think when it starts to feel long, that might be where some introspection where I say, "Hey, how do you really? Are you still having fun? Are you still passionate?" I don't ever see a day where I'm not, but
Mhm.
if that was to come, then you have to like really look inward about what you're doing. But I really do appreciate this. We have a mutual friend, and Mark Horo has been a guest on the show as well. When
That's
he
right.
knew I was talking to you, he said, "You got to ask Jason about the 1978 cello pack with Glenn Burke on it." So there you go. I've opened the door by request of Mark. So I'll let you take it from there.
Well, that you know what, if there is a Hall of Fame of collectors, right? Let's put Mark up there. Like the Ruth Mathewson, Wagner. You know what I mean? Inaugural class. I mean, they're in terms of just a guy with an incredible collection, but just a guy who's a great friend, generous, tremendous person. He takes that one. So I know this makes for bad video, but I felt like I needed the prop. So pardon me, or I'll try not to crash into things here. But point being, yeah. So we met up in Cooperstown. There were 17 of us last month that took a long weekend there. And so, of course, one of the things you do besides go to the Hall of Fame and whatnot is you go into all the card shops and, you see if there's anything cool. Now, one of the things, and this was a pleasant surprise to me, I would just presume you go to Cooperstown and cards are going to be triple the normal price, right? Because they could do that. But for whatever reason, like the card shops are actually pretty good. They've got cool stuff. If you're looking for vintage, there is a lot of vintage. The prices are pretty good, right? So at any rate, we go into this place, Dave and Adams. That's kind of a household name for parts of the hobby, but they've got a little presence on Main Street in Cooperstown as well. I walked in, and I think because of what they're more known for, I wasn't expecting to see anything older than about 2019, let's say. But they had a box, a 1978 Topps cello box. And, I don't know if it was completely full, but it was like mostly full. And of course, the way the cello packs are, right? I mean, they're famous for you can see who's on top, right? So, I go there, and of course, I'm not expecting to see an Eddie Murray rookie showing or anything like that. But I was like, oh, I wonder if they've got, somebody I like, right? Because, there are players out there like Manny Mota. If they had a Manny Mota show, and I love Manny Mota, but, maybe they wouldn't put him with the high price stuff, right? So anyways, literally top of the box, Glenn Burke, right? Glenn Burke, no way. And I was in disbelief that he would just be in there like a common player, right? And for a lot of fans, they probably don't think twice or even know, why he would be remarkable in any way, especially if they look at his stats, right?
I'll just say, you know, for those that don't know about
Sure.
Glenn Burke or the story or the history, uh, you know, Google them, do
Yeah.
some research, find that out. You'll be surprised what you don't know about him. One scout compared him talent wise to Willie Mays. Unfortunately, it didn't work out
Yeah.
as planned for many different reasons, but definitely a great player. Uh, Again, another guy played multiple sports as well. The creator, not to cut you off too, Jason, but
Got it.
him and Dusty Baker are been credited for what we know today as just an everyday celebration thing. The high five, right? Someone does well, an athlete's high five. They were really the first ones to do it after a Dusty Baker home run. But it's an interesting career and interesting story there. But go ahead. I just want to kind of
Yeah. No, you
interject
got it.
that.
And I was going to say, yeah, definitely look them up, but better yet, get the book Singled Out. The book Singled Out came out a couple years ago.
Yep.
It's a beautiful book. And the artwork on the cover is nice too, but the writing is stupendous. So, anyways, but point is, they've got this, and I'm like, really? He's in just with the regular guys. What's up, right? And I asked the fella, would it be okay to see who else you have showing? Because I was pretty convinced that, of course, I'm going to buy this. But the only dilemma was, what if they had a Steve Garvey showing, right? Because 78 Garvey, that was the card. That was sort of like the origin of the hobby for me, and friendships and all these things, right? So such an important card in my life. And so the guy actually laid them all out for me. They didn't have Garvey. What was kind of curious was just how many good players they did have. They had the Reggie Jackson World Series card showing on top. They had Tommy Lasorda, Hall of Fame manager, kind of ironic with the Glenn Burke story. But at any rate, I mean, there were some pretty good, solid players. But Burke was the one. So I picked this up. I think the guys that ran the shop were a little perplexed why I was so excited. They probably checked his baseball reference and they were like, what? -2 WAR, what? But yeah, I mean, it was funny. This was the first card shop I think that I'd gotten into, and I pretty much used up my budget for the entire weekend. So after that, I didn't really do a heck of a lot. But I mean, this I got to admit, and I mean, as a collector, that there's kind of like book value, but there's how we value our cards or
Yep.
sentimental value. Like
Yep.
book value, I'm not going to pretend this is a top 5 in my collection, but just in terms of like things I have that are cool and kind of unique and hard to find, this is like a top 5 collectible in my collection, you know? And, a lot of the cool cards we have, if something happened to one, as long as you put the right amount of money behind it, you could replace it, right? But for something like this, I gotta say, you might be looking for years before you find another cello pack
Yeah.
with Glenn
Well,
Burke.
it's listen, it's meant to be, right? Like you said, David Adams, not known for vintage wax, right? They're known for
Mhm.
more the current stuff. You go in there and that's in there. I think it's serendipity, right?
Yeah.
it was meant to happen. And it's meant to be in your collection and it is now. And like you said, great book. And even if you're not a book reader, at least do some research, Google, you learn something, and it's always great to learn about the history of the game, the history of certain players, and that sort of thing. And it's a glad Mark told me to ask you because that's just and it's a memory, right? It's a memory you'll have
Absolutely.
from that trip with a great group of people, and wherever you have that pack on an easel, you'll look at it,
Yeah.
you'll remember, what Glenn Burke means to you, but also the people you were on the trip and when you acquired it and all that, right? The stories behind the cards, and that's what this hobby is really about. The hobby's the people, as the tagline of the show says. But Jason, again, I appreciate you making some time for us. You're doing great things for the hobby, for people in the hobby, and I appreciate you. Give out anything you want to give out, website, social, where people can see what you do. If you want to plug Saber or website there, by all means, whatever you want to throw out there, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Okay. I will just indulge myself with all kinds of self promotion then. No. So, yeah, Saber, I will say, saber.org/join. It's a great value at $65 a year. Nobody regrets it. There's no money back guarantee, but nobody regrets it. Baseball fans, if you're into cards, if you're into anything, join Saber. It's worth your while. We also have our annual convention. It's going to be in Chicago, July 5th through 9th. So if you hurry up, you can get in on that. I'm going to be there and I'm planning our baseball cards committee meeting as we speak. So, Saber Baseball Cards blog, I mentioned that at the beginning. What's the URL? It's saberbaseballcards.blog. That's easy to remember. Saber, of course, is SABR. Saberbaseballcards.blog. We've got usually a couple new articles every week, and they span the gamut. It's usually older stuff, but sometimes we bring in the new. Some of it's scholarly, some of it's fun, some of it's silly, whatever, but it's a great read. On Twitter, Saber BB Cards, BB Cards. So that's Saber and Saber Baseball Cards. As for me, well, you see Heavy J Studios, heavyjstudios.com is the website, or on Twitter, HeavyJ28. And one last plug for Hobby News Daily. John and I are connected to that.
Yeah,
So I'll say that I am a writer of the Vintage Vignettes column. Vignettes? I got to learn how
yeah.
to say it. I just know how to spell it.
No, I think you got
But,
it. I think you got it.
but anyways, yeah. So I do some writing for Hobby News Daily, about an article a month. And you can find us at Hobby News Daily, hobbynewsdaily.com. Kind of all the things you'd guess it would be is what it is. So, John,
Yeah.
I
And
want to
listen, from one writer to another,
thank
Jason does excellent writing. I have to like try to compete with him and match up as best I can. I don't think I do, but I give it the old college try. But excellent stuff. Shameless plug. Check all that stuff out, but including his work at Hobby News Daily.
Now, John, I got to end this with something super corny, but I can't resist, right? Because forget all the baseball stuff. I'm a math nerd. Besides it all, so I'm just gonna say, right, that about 100 years ago, John von Neumann pretty much invented the computer, but present day, fast forward 100 years, John Newman has taken the computer to its highest level, which is live streaming quality content about baseball cards.
I'll take it. I don't know if I should, but I'm gonna take that and thank you. But listen, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. Check out for everyone listening. check out what this man's doing. Just incredible stuff. And I use the two words with certain people in the hobby, right? Ambassadors and advocate. And I don't just throw that around lightly. And it's two things you are, and you epitomize those two words. And keep. All I can say is keep it up, right? Don't change. So, thanks, Jason.
You got it. You got it, brother. Thank you very much.